What first drew your attention to President Coolidge?
Actually, my job. So right before the pandemic, I became one of our historians in the manuscript division with responsibility for 3 U.S. presidential collections, Taft, Wilson, and Coolidge. So we went home in March of 2020, as the rest of the world did. And at that time, we were in the process of digitizing the Coolidge papers. And I needed to write the text and select images for our website for that online collection. So I had a wonderful time. The rest of the nation was suffering. During the pandemic, I just had a terrific time delving into the collection, getting to know Coolidge, and coming up with a website that would help others get to know him as well.
Well, you mentioned that you were sort of spearheading 3 different presidents' collections, and that's something I kind of want to touch on in just a moment, but you spoke earlier at the conference. What were some of the main themes that you wanted to touch on for that remark?
For welcoming everyone, first of all, is to make people aware that at the Library of Congress, we collect a lot more than books, and including the papers of Americans, among them 23 U.S. presidents. And I think that this is something that is so significant about our presidency, is that from George Washington on, they come from the people. And to be able to be custodians of 23 of these presidential collections is an incredible honor. And more than anything else, they reveal our presidents to be very human and of the people. And Coolidge is no exception.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how different the presidential legacy was after Coolidge, with all the different libraries and like massive organizations. So I think it sort of speaks to Coolidge's character that it's part of the Library of Congress and sort of the last of that train.
And when someone gives their collection to the Library of Congress, they are giving it to the American people. And,
Right.
and I think, again, that's an extension of their public service, of their service to the nation, is that they're donating their collection to the nation, which is very nice, I think.
Right. What sort of aspects of Coolidge as a person do you think, maybe from your combing through his records and everything, do you think is just not often understood, aside from policy?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think that, again, if I can broaden it to our 23 presidential collections, I think this is something that each one of the collections reveals. If I could digress, there is a man named Edward Bernays, who is often called the father of public relations. He kind of invents the whole field. In 1924, he was asked to put together a celebrity endorsement event with Calvin Coolidge, in which he invited actors and actresses to come down from New York and have breakfast with the Coolidges. This was intended to warm up the president's image, which might have been viewed as being a bit cool with the nation. So this was hopefully to make him a little bit warmer and more approachable to the average American during an election year. And Edward Bernays said that what impressed him the most about meeting the president is that he was meeting an institution. I think this is actually a problem with how we view our presidents and the presidencies. We view them as institutions. And that's one of the things that these presidential collections do, is that they let us see the president as an individual, their full humanity, and to see the person behind the institution. So Calvin Coolidge's papers, as I think I've mentioned before, does not have his personal files. It has his executive office files. So there's not an awful lot that's personal in there. But what strikes me about the collection is that you get to see those moments when the president is receiving information and making a decision. It's grounded in the moment based on what he felt and what he knew at that time, with no benefit of hindsight. It's not history written after the fact. And you realize, just first of all, the enormous responsibility and pressure that the presidents are under. but it helps you to see them as individuals making decisions based on what they feel is best for the nation. And I just find that incredibly inspiring about these collections, is that you kind of walk with the presidents as they're making decisions. And it's amazing, and what you come away also with Calvin Coolidge is an amazing consistency, through everything that is, coming to him as president. There's an amazing consistency in his vision, in his philosophy of governing that remains true from the time he's governor through his presidency and on. He's staying true to who he is.
Right. So a consistency of record is something that might be nice to have more of in our public officials, I think, for sure.
And staying true to who he was. I think, at times in our history, presidents have been under pressure to be something they're not, or to move in directions that they're not completely comfortable with. And I think what we see with Coolidge is this kind of compass that he has, where he has his true north, and he stays committed to it.
Well, I know that his true north is something that many Americans feel might be really helpful for us, just in terms of being able to follow through and just stick with something that you actually believe. I think is something that's much needed.
And being able to pivot when necessary, based
Right.
on new information and needs and whatnot. But I think it's being true to yourself.
Is there any sort of thing about Coolidge that you want to see presented more? Any aspect of whether that be policy or him as a person, but maybe just his presidency, or maybe even the times?
I think what I hope is that now that his papers are digitized and available online, I hope that more and more people realize how incredibly rich they are about the times in which Coolidge was president. It is, overwhelmingly, it's incoming correspondence in the collection, and then responses by Coolidge's personal secretary, which is what today we call the chief of staff. And and again, there are letters from the president in there, but it's also this amazing record of the United States in such a pivotal decade, a decade of profound social change that was taking place and intense debate. And it's not just cabinet secretaries writing to the president and to the White House. It is not just foreign leaders writing. It is also the American people. It's someone sitting down at their kitchen table, selecting the stationery they're going to use and the pen to write to the White House, and composing their thoughts, and then telling the president what the president should do. Because we have never been shy about doing that. To an extent, every president has to invent the presidency, because Article 2 of the Constitution is so vague about how to actually be the president.
Right.
But we also tell the president how to be a president, and we don't hold back.
I love that image of someone selecting the stationery, just because there's sort of a pause there where there's a sense of gravitas. I'm writing to the president because I feel these things. I'm not just tweeting something and then going on to the next thing. Yeah. I think that's a really, really great point.
And some of these letters will say, I'm sure this letter will never be read. Well, excuse me, they're now preserved at the Library of Congress, where they are going to be read for generations to come.